This show contains profanity, advice you should never follow, humor that you might not enjoy. The names have been changed. Do not try this at home.
Hey folks, Pox Holiday coming at you. I just want to let you know this is going to be a two-parter. We had such a great time with Baltimore Jack, and lots of stories, and lots of really good information as well, especially for people who are thinking about through hiking. Alright, so I know you guys are going to have a good time with this one, so I'll get this stuff out of the way. Find us on Facebook. Just look for us. We're the only ones there, called Pox and Puss Podcast. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter. At Pox and Puss is the handle. You can also follow me at Pox Holiday on Twitter. And Puss is at ATPussInBoots. On next week's show, we're going to tell you about our crowdsourcing. Yeah, there's a buzzword. Alright, bucket. Talk to you guys next week. Until then, enjoy episode 16, part 1. Baltimore Jack eats an entire chicken, parentheses, and drinks 2 liters of Hawaiian punch.
Greetings, Yellow Blazers, Blue Blazers, Bill Bryson lovers, Bill Bryson haters.
Pirates, purists, skippers, double dippers.
Uppers, downers.
Whatever.
My name is Pox Holiday, and sitting to my left is...
Puss in Boots.
And sitting to my right is Baltimore Jack Tarlin. We're sitting in Mountain Crossings. I always want to call it Wassee constantly. I was sitting in the back of the mailroom. I saw somebody here. Their name is Olive Oil, O-Y-L.
Good name.
Yeah, it's not bad. And, it's actually just olive oil.
It's full of olive oil, not a trail name. Never mind. Scratch that.
So the person who just proved to me that it was just olive oil is Baltimore Jack, and we're going to talk with him a little bit more whenever we come right back. All right. All right. So
let's go.
All right. So here we are in the, what was this? Just like the storage room? We got a little stock room back here.
Well, this is not my office. This would be, I guess it would be called the back room. It is where hiker mail is kept, and we like to keep that in a secure location.
Yeah.
We're in the
Let the
closet.
riffraff back
The
here.
coffee machine is here. It's very important.
This is the important shit.
The hiker staff
The
refrigerator is here.
lifeblood
It's
of
actually, it's quite the spot.
Now, you were telling us before we started that there are a lot of thru-hikers that work here now. That a majority of the people that work here are thru-hikers?
I think that's always been the case here at Mountain Crossings. The present owner, who's been here 12 years, is a good friend of mine, and I first met him on one of my thru-hikes, I believe, in 2001. So I'm not on the permanent staff. I just come by for a few weeks every year. I still live up north in New Hampshire, but I like to come by and I like to meet the new people, and every year it's different. This year, I believe, with one exception, everyone on the staff has either hiked the trail in its entirety or done great big pieces of it. So it just means they're in a really good position to help people, and they know what, when they see people walk through the door. Everybody was on day 4 once.
Yeah. Well, I know that for me, when I started in 1998, I had a 20-year-old tent. And it was a old one-person North Face POS. And I'd use it once or twice.
POS.
Piece of shit?
I'm not. Oh, yeah. Okay. This was a model I was unfamiliar with.
Yes. The TNF POS.
It all becomes clear now.
But I got to, I can't remember which shelter it was at, but it was a day like today, and today is nasty outside. Good old thru-hiking rainy, nasty
It's
day.
the day God provided.
Yes. And so I wound up being basically wet the first day. The second night I was out, it froze deep, and I woke up to about 3, 4, 5, 6 inches of snow right below Blood Mountain. Came up and over, got here, and was like, I need a tent. And
But by the way, the horrors that you have just described, there's a word for that.
What's that?
That's called normal weather in springtime in North Georgia.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Oh yeah, no, it wasn't.
Just so people didn't think that you were running into something.
If you miss out on that, you're missing out on part of the experience.
Exactly. But I got here, and
some people enjoy the experience so much that
they stick
catching
around.
a Greyhound the next day.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm delighted you
we
stuck with the program.
We talked about it before on here that when I got just below Blood Mountain, had that nasty night. I basically slept in an icicle. And got up the next day, came down here. We met these 2 guys who, man, we were talking about this before we got on. Like, the gearhead end of things, like the progression towards like gear. Maybe the like the gadgets, like you were talking about. And there were a couple of guys that we met out there. Man, they had their act together. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they got here and never came home. You know, and it's one of those situations. You had this
Never
like,
came home, or
never came back to the trail. Sorry,
yes.
yeah, they went home, never came back.
Right.
And you have that idea this first couple of days where you're like, man, that guy really knows what he's doing, and they could be off in a couple of days. And you know, for me, just to give you some background, I used my stove for the first time at Amicalola Falls Hotel to just test to make sure it worked. You know, and hell, I made it.
Well, I'm glad it worked, and that you didn't discover 4 days later that it didn't. But that's
Exactly. Oh, I'm not bragging. I'm just saying, like, you know, anybody.
Good.
Yeah, not a good brag. But let's see. We had a couple of things here. I wanted to go ahead and just, you told us we could use your real name. So your real name?
My real name is Jack Tarlin.
Your first thru-hike.
My first thru-hike. Oh, what a good question. First of all, my first attempt at a thru-hike failed. Or
Right.
maybe, I don't want to say failed, but I did not succeed in my goal, which was to hike the trail in its entirety. That was 1995.
Okay.
So a lot of people don't know that, but the first time I set out to thru-hike the trail, I did not complete it.
What happened there?
I broke 3 ribs and got off the trail in Maine at around the 2,000-mile mark. Which, if I may speak bluntly,
Yeah.
profoundly sucked in more ways than I can describe.
Yeah. Did you fall or?
I took a fall in the White Mountains and I didn't think much of it. And then I kept going for a few weeks, and one lovely morning I woke up and was throwing up black blood into a snowbank, and that was a good sign that I needed to be back in Boston.
Yeah.
Time to
So
go to town.
I went back and got my old job and my suit and necktie back and did what I had to do for a while, and it bothered me. So I went back out again the following summer, which was summer '96, and I found a tree where I'd been throwing up black blood, and that's meaning where I decided to quit.
Yeah.
So I started walking again and made it to Katahdin, had a wonderful summit day, went back to Boston, and all that fall and winter, it kind of drove me crazy that, and it's funny because there's absolutely nothing wrong with taking more than a year to complete the trail. I have like the utmost respect for section hikers or people that either don't want to or for one reason or another cannot take off 6 months. So it's not like I have any problem with section hikers, but it really bothered me that my hike was abbreviated. So I asked my boss for a leave of absence and was flatly refused, so I quit. And April 1st, 1997, I set out to thru-hike. And so my first full, complete thru-hike was, in fact, 1997. Thought I got it out of my system, went back to Boston. Actually, by then, I was in New Hampshire. I thought all winter, and I so thoroughly got it out of my system that April 1st, 1998, I was back at Springer. And this did, in fact, continue for what turned out to be the next 7 consecutive years, which wasn't something I planned to do.
Yeah.
It just kind of worked out that way.
Just
You know.
happened.
Nice.
I had an unsatisfactory home life, is what I usually tell people. There wasn't a whole lot going on. I was kind of sort of self-employed for a lot of that period, so I had an understanding boss who would give me a lot of time off. And so your original question was when did you first do this?
Yeah.
I did my first long hike. I mean, I hiked a great deal as a child. I grew up in the Boston area, and my father was active with a group called the Appalachian Mountain Club.
Oh, okay.
A group of people who I have learned to respect and sometimes despise as I've grown older. But no, we would go out to Western Massachusetts and Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine. So I had done a great deal of hiking when I was younger, and then basically stopped for 20 years. I'd always entertained the idea of doing the whole trail, but it was kind of an idea that was dormant for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then one fine day in my 30s, I can't even remember whether it was a magazine article or what that sparked it, but I decided I wanted to hike. And
yeah, you jumped ahead of my third question, which was what brought you out there. Yeah.
well, I mean,
That's
we were an active outdoor family and all that sort of thing. like a lot of people, I was taught how to hike by my dad.
Yeah.
I was never into scouting or anything. That was kind of scorned when I was a child. I was the only boy in the family, but I had sisters. But no, we would do camping and stuff like that. I think I got into it a lot more than anyone else in the family did.
How many total through hikes are we talking here?
I have hiked the trail 9 times. 7 times were through hikes end to end. They were all northbound, i.e. Georgia to Maine. And I've hiked the trail twice in sections, meaning more than 1 year, and then other sections as well.
Yeah. But listeners to our show definitely know about Baltimore Jack. He's been mentioned a couple of times, and we'll bring up a story that Puss has told maybe once.
Or 35
times.
Good heavens. That's a good one. It might even be true.
Yeah, it's true. Well, this one is true. Actually,
story.
Do you want to go ahead and start off then?
Yeah. So when I started in 2009, I did the approach trail, and I was so excited. I mean, like, I was just wings and clouds the whole way up the approach trail. And I get to Springer Mountain, and I sign in, and I go to Springer Mountain Shelter, and I get everything all set up and eat my dinner, and it was just around sunset, so I walk back to the rock, and I figure I'm going to sit on top of Springer Mountain and watch the sunset, and I was elated. This is like, decades of dreaming coming together. I was so excited.
Decades?
Decades.
How old are you? It couldn't have been that many
I was
decades.
25 when I started, so.
Fine. Just
And I
Dreams.
so I get back, I get to the top of Springer Mountain, and there's this guy kind of like laying back on his pack on top of Springer Mountain. He's watching the sunset too, and
no, I can see where the story's going.
no, don't go there
exactly
yet.
Where it's going.
But I see him there, and I was just so excited that I just was like, "Hi, what are you doing here? Like, are you starting your thru-hike today too?" And he was just like, "No, I just finished." And I said, "I'm sorry, what?" And he said, "Yeah, I southbounded. I started in..."
He was one of them.
He started like September 15th or something. And I was like, "Why would you do that?" And he was like, "I wanted to hike all by myself." And I'm like, "Well, you got it, brother. Tell me about yourself." And it was this guy named Graham. And I said, "Well, what's your trail name?" He said, "I never got a trail name. I never really saw anybody long enough." And I was like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Well, do you have any advice for me?" And he was like, "No, not really." And I was like, "Anything that I shouldn't miss?" And he said, "Do you know Baltimore Jack?" And I said, "No." And he said, "You will." And that was what I took away from the conversation. And I think I told that story like on our second...
Was this a positive reference?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, evidence.
Well, thank you, Graham.
Yeah.
I don't know if I fed him, gave him a drink.
You don't remember he was a white guy with a beard? You don't remember him?
Yeah. No, I think all of the above. I'm sure that his experience with you was really good enough why he said it. But
I'm delighted to hear it.
But it was one of those things that it was just like, of all the things that he could have told me. I mean, here he is. He has just finished his thru-hike all by himself, and the only thing he had to say was, "Do you know Baltimore Jack?"
Well, Graham, I'm glad it was good for you.
One thing to say.
Let's move on. No.
Well, you want to know the first time I met you?
All right.
Okay. So, was in the Shenandoah.
Is the rest of this show going to consist of like
Just embarrassing moments?
Yes, like this is your life without clothes on? Okay,
Yes,
let's go.
yes.
Fine. Magnificent.
So, 1998,
Yes.
Shenandoah,
Yes.
very
Good
north
year.
end. It was a shelter with Professor. The Professor.
Peace pipe.
Peace pipe.
Let me.
You remember this?
Professor?
Do you remember the night I'm
Peace
talking
pipe.
about?
Peacemaker was probably there. Sensei was probably there.
Sensei was not.
Tapeworm might have been there. It was a good group of people.
These guys were. This was right before the tribe formed.
You
Which
realize
was that
it's
group.
scary and horrifying that we have recall of this because
yes.
we're talking about something that was 15 years. Okay.
Yeah. And then so Barf and I pull up, and we're like just dead at the end of the day. One of those just what the hell ever kind of days. And we get up, and all of you guys are kind of around the picnic table. And this woman showed up. It was a woman and a guy, and I cannot remember her name, but she was a lawyer, and there was a bit of tension between you and this woman. And I don't remember what it was. And because this was the first time I met you. It was the first time I met Professor and Peace Pipe. Yeah, you guys.
I knew who she was.
You guys had stayed at a shelter the night before. And like she just like you were the loudest, so she was going after you. And so later that night, like she basically was like, it was going and going and going. And finally somebody was like, are you going to stay here tonight? To her. And she's like, no, we're still going. Like, well, why don't you guys keep going?
So everybody goes, good.
Yeah, well, why don't you keep on going?
Right.
So she moves on. And then that night was the night where you were recorded snoring.
Oh!
Ding.
I haven't thought about that story for years because I think it was professor or sensei who did it. They had some horrible little device.
Peace Pipe had it.
This was back in the 12th century when people, electronic devices were much different.
Had their little mini.
They did, in fact, record my snoring. They recorded waking me up, and I can give a verbatim transcript, and I
Yes.
haven't heard this in 50... Jack. What the hell you want? They're going, you were snoring. I go, nonsense.
Nonsense. That was it.
I don't snore. Nonsense. You're full of shit. Right? And then they played it back for me. And it was obviously me, and it obviously was me snoring, to which I probably said something like, boy, like, what a dirty, underhanded, you guys are a basket full of assholes. I can't believe you just did this. Yes, this is a true story. I cannot deny it. I do not stay in shelters anymore.
Oh, really?
Yes. As I've grown progressively older and larger, I'm very sensitive to the noise made by other people, and they are certainly sensitive to the noise made by me.
Yeah.
So I have discovered that I sleep better in shelters, and so does anybody I'm with.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing this delightful moment from the 12th century. It is a true story. I will not remotely deny.
Oh
it.
yeah, no, it's not an embarrassing thing. It was just like that was my introduction.
Oh no,
to you.
they taped this for me. They confronted me with it, and I immediately, of course, denied it. And then I was guilty as the day is long. I was snoring like a freight train.
So I had no clue who you were.
Yes.
And it was like, and I didn't stay in the show. I was in a tent that night.
No, this is
So I
an
woke up-
absolutely true story.
Woke up the next morning and found that story out. And then, like, just a matter of days later, just like, a week or so later or whatever, I walk into Harper's Ferry.
Yes.
And you're given a goddamn tour of the headquarters. And I walk in and I'm like, who the hell is this guy? He fights with lawyers. He snores. And no, that's a bad way to put it. I was just amazed. I was like, who is this person? I didn't know your story. It was cool, though.
First of all, I'm sure I'm not the first person in the history of the Republic that has had a disagreement with an attorney. So
No.
I'm not sure if fighting with lawyers is necessarily a bad thing.
Let the record show.
Yeah.
I don't know about giving a tour. I was probably just answering a few questions.
There was a
at
couple
the
there.
ATC Center.
Yeah, there was a couple there, and you were in front of that big.
I must know the big
3D map.
topographic
Yeah.
3D. I should say right now that I have other than being a member, I have no formal connection with the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. Have never been employed by them. I am not, and have never been employed to or even authorized to give tours. So please, if anybody is horrified at the thought of me representing the wonderful people at the ATC, nah.
Yeah,
Okay.
probably a little hyperbole on my end, but
No, you were just wrong. But okay.
That wouldn't be the first time.
Okay, fine.
But yeah, you were given this, and we're like saying off the side, like, what's going on with this guy? I think the next time I heard your name was in 2003,
Yes.
it was in 2000. And I worked in New Mexico. I worked at a camp that
They permit you to
deals
work
with
with
kids.
children?
They did.
Okay.
It wasn't encouraged, but they allowed me to.
Okay.
So I was working in New Mexico, and this guy comes up to me and he says, "We're talking for a while. We're at a climbing camp in the backcountry,
Yes.
a rock climbing camp." And I had a group of kids there. They're doing the rock climbing thing, and he's moderately supervising. And we get to talking, and he's like, well, I did the Appalachian Trail last year. And I was like, really? I'm like, oh, cool. I did it in 1998. And he was like, oh, yeah.
Who do you know? Blah, blah, blah.
Did you know Baltimore Jack?
Oh, Jesus.
And I was like,
You will.
yes, I did. And he's like, he was with you at the Doyle.
Oh, good heavens. I haven't thought
And
about
I cannot
that
remember his
story.
name. I mean, what year was that? Was it,
1999.
is that a story you want to tell? For posterity?
Good heavens. I will tell an abbreviated version of
Okay.
it. because
Condensed version.
The Doyle Hotel, as many people know, and I assume most of the listeners of this show know, is a legendary establishment, century-old hotel, originally built by the Anheuser-Busch people in the center of Duncannon, Pennsylvania. in the Appalachian Trail. Goes down the main street there and crosses
Need
the
a
road.
box?
What you need?
Robinson? There is a box for
Yeah,
Robinson.
K. Robinson.
Yeah, it's a Quaker Oats box.
There you go. Thank you guys very much.
And legendary place. It's just a wonderful place for hikers to stay. It went through some rough times in the late 90s. It went through a series of owners, and the present owners, I might add, who have absolutely nothing to do with this anecdote, Pat and Vicky, who have been running the place now for the better part of a decade or more, have done everything they can to restore the building and have put a great deal of time, effort, and love into it. So I wish to stress that this story has nothing to do with them. There was a point in the early 90s when the place was, quite frankly, getting so run down that it was a question of, whether or not it would be able to stay open. They always seemed to be 10 seconds ahead of one inspector or another, either the health people or the fire department.
Right.
The story that Pox mentions is rather a notorious one. We arrived at the Doyle, we signed into the Doyle, and they gave me a key and sent me upstairs. It's not the kind of place where a bellman carries your bags. I should add that the first time I went to the Doyle, there was a sign behind the bar that said, Doyle Hotel, rooms, $10. Rooms that lock, $12. Because and the locks, in fact, they'd replace the door locks with these hasp locks with combo locks like you had on your locker when you were 14.
Yeah.
Because all the real locks on the door had been banged loose and shot out by junkies.
Yeah.
Once again, I stress that this was many years ago. Well, anyway, so I'm marching down the hall and looking at the number on my key there, and I realized that there was something really horrible going on that floor of the Doyle, and there was a rather distinctive aroma, which God forbid you should ever smell it, but if you ever smell it, I guarantee you can go 20 or 30 years and you will know exactly what it is. So I got up to my room, and this aroma was rather pungent. And at that point in my mind, there was pretty much no doubt as to what it was. And I went and opened my room and, threw my pack down on the bed and started squaring away. But it was so horrifying in there that I just couldn't stay. So I went down and got the manager, who I knew, who I shall not name. And I told him of the situation. And I invited him to come up to the floor with me. And I go, blank, I'm not going to say his name. What the hell is that smell? To which, of course, he goes, what smell? And I go, that smell. And then I realized, to my horror, that it was much worse 3 feet away at the door next to me. And I bent down and regrettably, I knocked on the door and there was no answer. But I did hear this going on in there. Let me speed up the story.
That's all right.
It turned out that the room was occupied. They had these long-term tenants. In some cases, they were old guys that had retired from the railroad or something, and they lived there, either month to month or in some cases for years. And it turned out that unfortunately, this room was occupied by someone who obviously had checked out of the Doyle at some point, and as near as I could tell, had checked out of the Doyle several days before. This, I will leave out the various details, but
Had he? No, here the only questions I have. Had he died lying against the door?
well, that was the problem, because I asked, have you got a pass key? Can we go in there and try to endeavor to find out if he's all right, if there's anything we can do for him? To which he said, Nah, it's dead bolted. And I looked at him, I go, well, yeah, you got that right. And he thinks about this for me, and he goes, oh, wait a minute. You're shitting me, right? And I go, no, regrettably, I'm not shitting you. He goes, you really think so? And so we knock on the door, we pound on the door, and eventually we got a 30-foot ladder and went around back and, threw that up against the wall and clambered up there and discovered that the tenant had indeed left this veil of tears, and he'd left it in such a way that he was not a small person, and 5 days of lying there in the July heat had not made him a smaller person. And his head was basically, the way doors open, they open into a room.
Yeah.
And if you've got a rather recumbent 300-pound decomposing dead person there with his head against the door, it kind of makes it hard to get into the room to remove them. So my friend, the manager, came up with a brilliant idea. He goes, "Hey, we can jimmy the window and just go in there, Jack, and grab him by the ankles and pull him back 2 feet." And I looked at him, and I'm going, this is many years ago, but I think I have pretty good recall on what I said. I said, "The fuck's wrong with you? I don't work here."
Come on, Jack.
So eventually,
grab his ankle.
well, no, eventually we did
Famous words
manage.
anyhow.
Also, I'm going, maybe this is a crime scene. You don't want to go in there and tamper with his shit and whatever. Well, eventually,
It's a job for the cops.
eventually we did go in there.
Did you grab his ankles?
The ankles were grabbed.
Oh.
He was moved back. The door was open. This, that, and the other thing. They did get him out of there. Unfortunately, when the door opened into the main corridor, it, shall we say, created a worse atmosphere than had been present previously, which did result in me spectacularly and cinematically throwing up in front of the entire population of Duncannon, who are now gathered outside the Doyle wondering what all the police
Including
cars and
the
things were
newspaper
doing.
photographer?
Yeah, so, I mean, it was the most... The thing was is that... what the hell was... Oh, yeah, the firemen in town had some kind of barbecue, so I had just consumed an entire chicken and 2 liters of... not Mountain Dew, 2 liters of Hawaiian Punch.
Oh.
Which... Okay, no, if you were ever unfortunate enough to have sat through the first Exorcist film, you probably have a good idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It was...
Split PC
Well,
style.
there's this large balcony that goes around the hotel.
Yeah.
And I had just taken in a good lungful of the dear departed, and
Because you had to go back in to get
I had to go back in to
packed.
get my stuff.
Yeah.
Because the health people had closed the, they
Yeah.
basically told all the hikers they had to leave.
I was like, oh,
And then I
God.
realized, holy shit, my stuff's still up in the room. And so they said, okay, go get it, but be real quick. So I kind of tried to hold my breath, kind of like that scene in The Right Stuff where John Glenn holds his breath for 2.5 minutes. Regrettably, I'm not John Glenn.
It
so
sounded like a better idea at the time.
well,
Yeah.
I let my breath out, and then I took a good lungful, and
Yeah.
And this was the good people of Duncannon were treated to something that probably still gives some of them bad dreams. The best part of this story was that somehow, and this was long before the internet, this is long before people had cell phones, it was like the trail telephone. I mean, within days, everyone in the trail within 100 miles had heard about this. And
Yeah.
we couldn't figure out how, because it wasn't like people had journals and they weren't tweeting or twitting or whatever the hell people do these days. But there actually were rudimentary internet journals back then, and one of them, and I'd heard 19 different versions of the story, none of which had any connection to the truth, except one person actually got it right, and they told a reasonably coherent version of the story, which concluded with this great line, was, "From everything I've heard about Duncannon and the Doyle Hotel, it does not remotely surprise me that a decomposing corpse was discovered there.
Yeah.
It also does not remotely surprise me that it was Baltimore Jack that discovered it." And so there are many versions of that story that have made the rounds.
Well, that-
I should now stress, and I mean stress, underline 3 times, that this belongs in the mists of the ancient past,
Yes.
the dark and horrible past. These sorts of things do not happen at the Doyle anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, you got to figure it's a 100-year-old building. Something pretty horrible has probably happened in every room there. I mean, that's what happens when you're dealing with. But
Every time we've joked about it on here, the Doyle, because I got there after doing the Boiling Springs, the Duncannon 26-miler thing, and like you said, the telephone thing. Same thing happened to us. We pulled up, and the professor was standing outside, and he was like, "Heard you guys were coming." And it's like, who the hell told you? We went from we didn't pass anybody throughout the day, and we were ahead of everyone.
well, this is an interesting phenomenon, and a lot of people remark on it because, of course, there's the notebooks and trail registers in just about every shelter and hostel, and even today, I mean, people still use them, of course. Although years ago it was much more useful because it was kind of trail. It was primitive email. I mean, this is how you communicated with friends. This is where you knew where people were. If there was a friend that was a couple days ahead of you, you knew where they were. If they wanted to leave you a message, I mean, back in the old days, they couldn't use cell phones because they didn't exist, and and there would just be a message saying, "Hey, Tommy, this is Fred. I know you're out there somewhere. I'm going into Port Clinton or going into somewhere, going to take some time off. You want to pull some big miles and do a couple of big days and try to catch up. Now is a good time. So it's kind of like this primitive Pony Express. But here's the really remarkable thing about trail journals. Obviously, if you get there on the 14th and you see an entry on the 12th from a friend of yours, it's not too tough to figure out when he was there. And if you've hiked with a guy, you know what his mileage is like, so you can kind of figure out where he's going to be in the next few days.
Yeah.
So using the registers, you always have a really, really good idea of who's ahead of you and where they are. Mm-hmm. But the really, really funny thing is you also have a really, really good idea of what's behind you. So if someone says, has anyone seen Billy? They'll just go, he's a day and a half back. Well, and someone might go, well, how the hell do you know that?
Yeah.
And you just go, he's a day and a half back. He ain't going to be in tomorrow, but he'll be in the day after that.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're right, because it's just that there's always this group of probably 100 to 150 people both ahead of you. You've met, you've stayed with, you've hiked with, partied with, drank with, spent time with, whatever. Everyone that's a week and a half ahead of you, and everyone that's a week and a half behind you. And sometimes you might get ahead of them, and sometimes they might get ahead of you. You'll go to a town, they don't need to resupply, so they'll keep going. So you stay, and all of a sudden you're a day and a half behind them, and then you keep going, and then they get to a place and they stop, but you don't need to stop because you just stopped. So there's all this back and forth. You get ahead of people, you get behind people, but you always have a really, really good idea of the men and women that are ahead of you or behind you. Mm-hmm. So if you want to find someone, you can. If you want to speed up and catch up with someone, you can. If you want to slow down to let someone catch up with you, you can. If you want to hide and avoid someone, you can.
Yeah.
And
it's amazing because
it's like primitive email Pony Express.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, even with phones and texting and everything else, I think people still rely on the registers.
Yeah.
So we're sitting here in Mountain Crossings, which
Yes.
is one of the most well-known buildings. It's the only building the AT actually goes through.
As far as I know, that is correct.
As far as I know. It's a stop on just about every northbounders list.
Well, they cross the street and here we are, so yeah.
Why not? And the weather outside right now is cool and damp, much like it was. And by that I mean what
the weather outside is horrible.
It's
I mean, have you looked outside?
It's pretty nasty. It's pretty sodden, and much like exactly how it was when I came through in 2009.
Yeah, that's. You know what that's called? That's called April in North Georgia.
Exactly.
I mean, everyone, and it's tragic because people show up and we've had people quit and this and the other thing. It's like you're not talking about Arizona, New Mexico here, and in the best of all possible years on the Appalachian Trail, you're going to be out for 170 to 190 days. Easily, 25% of the time, it's going to be shitty, about to be shitty, threatening to be shitty, making up its mind whether it's going to be shitty, chances of shitty, getting over being shitty, likely to. I mean, it's like, I'm sorry, but at least a quarter of the time, you're going to deal with, at best, overcast skies, and at worst, rain of biblical proportions. And there's nothing you can do about it, except perhaps alter your hike so that you're hiking, obviously. Gee, if you don't want to hike in snow, don't start in Georgia on Valentine's Day. Although there are brain damaged people that manage to do this every year. People go to hell their own way. That's fine. It amazes me that people go. It's been raining for 2 days, and it's supposed to be raining for at least 2 more. And they go, is that normal? And I go, yes.
Yes.
Well, what's to be done about it? And I go, sit it out and spend $300 or walk in the rain.
Smile
but
about
sooner or
not being
later,
at work.
or I mean, you kind of want to do a tough love and just say, suck it up and get out of here.
Yeah.
Deal with it. But you find a more diplomatic way of saying that because, it is discouraging, particularly if this is the outset of something, but I've started in sleet. I've started in snow. It's one way or another, there's going to be periods of bad weather. And the sooner you realize that and the sooner you find a way to deal and cope with that, the better. Because if you can't find a way to deal and cope with that, then I got one word to say to you, and that's Greyhound. Goodbye. And
it is to be expected. I mean, the Southeast definitely has its own special brand of monsoon season. And,
Well, someone said this a month ago because, I mean, they're going, it's snowing. Is that unusual? I go, this was like well over a month ago. I said, no, it's not unusual. I said, it's winter.
Yeah.
I mean, hello. I mean, unless you're from Key West or something, or I can understand.
Yeah.
It's like unless you've been like living in Panama the last 34 years. Yeah, it snows in wintertime. I realize that for some people this is just this shocking fact that they don't want to deal with.
Yeah, it's always amazes me that people think that it just doesn't snow in North Carolina or Georgia. It's like, no, I started in snow and ended in snow.
Of course,
it's just the way it goes.
Of course.
Or even, like now in retrospect, if I plan a weekend trip or something like that and it's going to be pouring down rain, I have the right to say, I care not to hike in the rain right now.
Right.
And it's not that big a deal because it's my weekend and I can do what I want.
Well, nobody likes it, but there does come a point sooner or later you got to...
It's part of it. It's and like, it's like a lot of things, I felt like if I didn't hike at snow at some point during my hike, I was missing out. That's part of it. Slogging through the snow and being miserable and cold and wet is part of it, and I look back on it fondly.
Have you talked to anyone who hiked in the year 2003?
That
was the rain year.
Yes.
We went.
98 wasn't dry.
98 wasn't dry, but
Yeah.
in 2003 we went 24 days without seeing the sun, and I mean not even 15 minutes to throw up a line and dry out your tent or whatever. You'd open up your pack at the end of the day, and there'd be like spores and fungus and ferns and mushrooms growing in your pack.
Yeah.
And you know how like your fingers get all wrinkled if you've been in the shower too long? Imagine your entire body looking like that.
like that for
And-
days.
Pruned.
That was the only time I had ever. I mean, obviously, I'm assuming most of the people in your audience know. A 0 day is a day which means 0 mileage achieved. You don't hike at all for one reason or another. You stay in town. You stay somewhere. 2003 was the only time I've ever zeroed in a shelter. And first of all, I don't even stay in shelters because I don't sleep well in them, and I snore, and no one that's in them sleeps well if I'm in them. We were in a shelter in Virginia. I remember it. It was called John's Hollow near Glasgow, Virginia. We were there for 2.5 days because it rained between 4 and 6 inches of rain. I mean, you'd get up at 6. It's raining. You put your head down. You get up now at 7:15. It's pissing down rain. You get up at 9. It's raining. 11. It's raining. 1 o'clock. It's raining. And you finally realize, wow. I mean, what's the point in leaving at 2:30 because you're going to get all your shit wet. You're going to be wet and miserable.
Yeah.
You're going to go 5 or 6 miles to the next shelter, and probably the 8 people that are in there
Have done the same.
didn't move.
Yeah.
So you don't even know if there's going to be room when you get there. So around 2 in the afternoon, you would just look at each other and go, "Well, this day is kind of fucked." Does
anybody have a deck of cards?
no, this was 10 years ago, and I remember it vividly because the register entries, you would just get to these register, and it was like the Donner Party out in California, and you'd see these horrible register entries like, we have now played hearts for 70 hours, or we don't want to move tomorrow, but we are completely out of food. We're going to draw straws. One more day of this shit and the fat kid gets it. and you realize, no, and it was indescribably horrible.
Wow.
We were going to have T-shirts printed up for like the few survivors of the attrition rate in 2003 was extraordinary.
bet.
How every year they talk about the completion figures and they either stay the same or they go up every year. If you look at a chart, you'll just see this dagger-like drop, which is 2003, and it kind of looks like a population chart for Western Europe, and then you realize that what you're looking at are the Black Death years, because in 2003, everyone just quit, and it was just indescribably horrible, and we were going to have a T-shirt printed up that said AT 2003, a foot bath in the wilderness. And so now every now and again I'll meet people, and when they find out they were out in 2003, you realize that was a real hiker because I took 9 days off in the middle of that shit because my daughter was graduating from high school up in Vermont, so I strung a whole series of rides, and hitchhikes and shuttles together and got up to southern Vermont. Attended the graduation, turned around, retraced my steps, and I came back and I go, wow, I'm off for 19 days, and at an average of whatever it was, 17, 19 miles. I did the math in my head and I go, wow, I'm like 182 miles behind my friends and I'm never going to see them again. And I got back on and I looked in the register and they were like 3 days ahead of me. And they hadn't moved.
Wow.
And every year's different. I mean, there's wet years, there's dry years, there's hot years. Last year was really different, especially working down here, because in North Georgia, North Carolina, in fact, pretty much most of the East Coast, it was the year without winter.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We just didn't. I mean, I think we broomed the flagstones and the stairs twice last winter, meaning we didn't have to shovel.
Yeah.
And so therefore the attrition rate was non-existent because nobody was discouraged enough to quit. This year, totally different. Although even that is usually greatly exaggerated. Every now and again I'll see on the internet 25 or 40% quit at Neels Gap. That's nonsense.
Right.
I mean, because we have shuttlers that are on the staff that if someone's going to quit, then they need to go to the bus station, the train station, the Atlanta airport, and we know about it because they ask us about it. I'm not sure what the attrition rate is. I think it is accurate to say that probably 40% of people, for one reason or another, they used to say 50%, but I don't think that's accurate. I think a third to 40% of people elect to quit for one reason or another before they get to Damascus, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
But I certainly don't believe the figures that say 25, 30% quit in the first week.
No.
I just as a hiker and as someone that has lived and worked on the trail in North Georgia, I just don't, and the completion figures and the, that's all a guess anyway. Because first of all, nobody knows how many people start every year. It's not like there's an official sign-in where you can say 1,712 people started this year as compared to last year. There's no, and of course when people quit, it's not like, they're usually feeling pretty shitty, so it's not like they're going to report in. Oh, by the way,
ATC. I just want to let you know.
I just want to know I pussed out here. No, so
just checking and let you know I'm quit.
So
let me rephrase that. This is where I elected to pursue other plans.
Yeah, because I one of the only register entries I remember from you, sorry, keep going down the old I remember, was it was further north. It would have been somewhere up north. I can't recall.
I hope
where.
it was good, because
It was.
I'm told I give great register.
Well, it was it was a very short one, and
Okay.
it leads to a question I've had for years. The only thing I remember, it was just like, all it said was, I got a wife and kids in Baltimore Jack.
Yes.
And it was like, it clicked with me right then. I'm like, oh,
the light dawns.
Hungry Heart.
Yes.
And so I was wondering, like, I mean, it's probably, there's two things. One, where does Baltimore Jack come from? And two, why that lyric, if you don't mind me asking.
I don't mind asking at all, because in 17, 18 years, there have probably been less than 20 people that picked up on that. My trail name does come from a Bruce Springsteen song, a song called Hungry Heart, which appeared on the double album The River. So it goes back to the late 70s. I was and still am a tremendous Springsteen fan, and the trail name thing bothered me, and I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Right.
And I didn't want to get one given to me.
Yeah.
So the song is about bad decisions and love gone wrong. As my best friend put it, kind of like all of Springsteen's songs.
All those happy ones he has.
No, and it's funny. It's my trail name. It's been my trail name for close to 20 years, although most people just call me Jack. Some people call me Baltimore. On rare occasions, people address me as BJ, and they are immediately corrected.
Yeah,
I'm from Boston, and generally that refers to something else.
Yeah.
So people think I'm from Maryland, which I guess if you call yourself Baltimore Jack that's a reasonable conclusion. The thing about it is, yes, the song is about bad decisions and love gone wrong, but the first line of the song is, got a wife and kids in Baltimore Jack. I went out for a ride and I never went back. like a river, don't know where it's flowing. I took a wrong turn and I just kept going, which would lead people to think that I walked out on my wife and kids, which is, I assure you, is not the case.
Right.
She walked out on me for 10,000 excellent reasons. But it's funny because I've thought in recent years of trying to... Trail world is a small world, and you get to the point where you've either met most people, or especially if you're active online and, you know, trail journals and trail plays and different places. Trail world is a small place, and I understand that there are many, many people that are familiar with me or with my name, even if they've never met me, and sometimes that's good and sometimes it's not so good, and sometimes they believe things that are not true. And I also realize that I've led the type of life which does not discourage outrageous storytelling. On more than one occasion, I've been tempted to start the trail in Georgia with a new trail name, you know, just to see how it happens. But unfortunately, what with photographs and everything, you know, that's just not going to be possible. So I realized that was a false hope.
Right.
I'm pretty much reconciled to being Baltimore Jack for the the one funny thing though, which is that if, you know, of course in trail world, you know, sometimes you go many, many years without seeing someone for a long, you know, or someone that you know, like we've been swapping stories from '98, for example. And I was in a trail town once, and I was out. I'd been out for a while and doing a long section hike, and I confess I do look radically different than I did in the years when I was through hiking every year. We all do. I am older, larger, and grayer, in about that order. So this woman, I won't say waddles, but this woman comes up to me and she's looking at me and staring at me, and I'm going, you know, do I know you?
Yeah.
Do you know me? Did I hike with you? You know, were we intimate? I'm going like, why is this woman staring at me? And finally, I just broke the silence. I looked at her and I go, yeah, can I help you? Is there something? What's up? You know? And she looks at me and she scrunches up her eyes and she goes, did you used to be Baltimore Jack? And, you know, I looked down at my gut and I just shook my head and I laughed and I go, yeah, I guess I did. I mean, what am I supposed to say? You know, hey, shit and falling it, lady. I'm still Baltimore Jack. No,
Thank you, madam.
Yes, I realize that I look a little different now. Thank you for pointing that out. You know, oddly enough, I'm not unaware of this, but yeah. Did you used to be? But anyway, so that's where the trail name comes from. Everyone thinks, of course, that I'm from Maryland.
So it's just the song?
Well, no. Well, yeah, no, I have no connection with Maryland whatsoever. In fact, it wasn't until a few years ago that I'd ever even... I have friends that live in Harper's Ferry, and one fine day that the subject came up, and they go, you ever been to Baltimore? And I go, no. And they go, you want to go? And I go, okay, fine. So they kidnap me.
Probably should.
We go to Baltimore. We do this touristy thing where you get in a little boat that looked like it was going to sink at any moment, and then I was going to get eaten by sharks in the harbor. So we tour Baltimore Harbor. We ended up in a district which turned out to be the saloon district of Baltimore, a place called Fells Point. And we went to like 9 bars in 2 hours. And I mean, I decided that I could very happily... I like this. What a great neighborhood. And I was informed that if you went like 4 blocks in any direction, you would probably get your head cut off and shrunk. It was marvelous. And then I went back on another occasion in Baltimore, and we basically, what did we end up doing? Oh, we ended up climbing a cast iron fence and sneaking into this cemetery at midnight so we could have a glass of cognac with Edgar Allan Poe, who happens to be buried in Baltimore. So, no, I have a soft spot for Baltimore. Here you go, Pox.
Yeah.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
Consummate Southerner, consummate Virginian. Where was he born?
Well, I know he went to UVA.
No, you are incorrect.
Where'd he go? I thought he went to UVA.
He was a singular failure because he was... nowadays they say withdrew for academic reasons. Yeah. No, he was thrown out. I mean, Edgar Allan Poe went to West Point.
I swear I've seen his dorm. They have his dorm shut off
at UVA.
Yeah.
Well, then he was there briefly because he spent most of his academic career, which ended in the same way, at the United States Military Academy.
The only reason I know is my uncle owned a bar in Charlottesville, and you want to know the name of it?
Edgar Allan Poe's.
Poe's. It was
Okay.
Poe's. Yeah. So.
Oh, I will certainly check that and get back to you. But no, he was thrown out of the U.S. Military Academy, but
Yeah.
he was not a Virginian. Edgar Allan Poe was born in Boston.
Oh, he was.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. I trust you.
If memory serves, 1809, same year as Abraham Lincoln. He died in Baltimore.
Did you used to write for a newspaper?
Several.
Several.
Yes.
Would you like to say which ones? Or
Nope.
okay. I just heard you had worked for.
Several. Most of them were in Boston, and some others in assorted small towns.
And not
it was
on there.
mostly.
I heard you worked on DC for the Washington Post. I'd heard.
You'd heard I worked for the Washington Post? Good
Yeah.
heavens.
I won't keep that.
I'd have been delighted to have worked for the Washington
That's what
Post.
somebody had told me.
Boston Globe.
Oh God, the things that I've heard or read or seen. There's a rather well-known trail book that said I was that I taught medieval history at several prominent New England colleges. Well,
Quite.
I'm going okay, but that's not remotely true. But that's all right. That sounds good.
I'll take it.
I'll take it. No, I know a great deal about 15th century England, but no, I never taught at any prominent New England college or university, and no, I never worked for the Washington Post.
So, yeah.
Most of my newspaper writing was actually film reviewing,
Really?
which is funny because when you spend 7 months out of the year hiking and traveling, it kind of. I mean, there was once upon a time when I lived to go to the movies. I mean, I think between 1976 and 1994. I mean, if a movie came out. Okay, give me your favorite movie from that period. Just
From what? 86?
in the late 70s, early 80s.
Oh gosh. I mean, at that point in time, I was born in the mid 70s. I mean, I would say like Ghostbusters would be of that era.
All right.
You know what I mean? Like, gosh, now.
Ghostbusters, 1984. Bill Murray, Harold Ramis. God, who the hell directed that? Okay, give me a real movie.
Yeah, real movie.
Okay.
What year was Cool Hand Luke?
Cool Hand Luke. Oh, marvelous. Paul Newman. Cool Hand Luke would have been 1965. Paul Newman, George Kennedy, Harry Dean Stanton, Strother Martin. Yeah, fantastic. You know,
Yeah,
I mean,
well, one of my
if a movie came out in that's a little earlier than the time frame I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because I actually was paid to see these movies, which is great fun.
Yeah.
So I've probably seen more good movies than anyone I know. I've probably seen more horrible, shitty movies than anyone I know.
Well, that's funny you mention that because I don't know if you've seen lately. You know, they're talking about how Bill Bryson's book, now that Richard Linklater from Days Confused, Slacker, that whole thing,
Yes.
that Waking Life, that
Yes.
he's attached to it now, like the rumor mill always.
I
goes
wish
with
him
that.
well with it. I hope they finally have come up with a coherent, complete script. I mean, the thing about Walk in the Woods, when it was originally envisioned as a film project with Redford and Newman, there was never any complete script. I mean,
Right.
here's a movie about two guys that set out to complete the trail. In point of fact, they walk less than a third of it. They never see Katahdin. So I'm going like, so of course I wish Mr. Linklater well. I mean, it was inevitable that something as successful of the book as would eventually, get the interest of television or film people.
Would you, if you were offered a role to be kind of because like we're kind of like, sure, I'll be in the Appalachian Trail movie. Would you accept the role or would
Probably not.
No?
I mean,
Like just like a background character?
I mean, there've been anywhere from half a dozen to 10 or 12. I don't even want to honor them by saying documentaries
Sure.
about the trail, and some of them I've participated in, and some of them I haven't, just because I wasn't confident about the project or the scope of the project, or you give someone an interview much as I'm giving you one, and you don't know what they're going to do with it.
Right.
No, I would not be interested in the Walk in the Woods film. If they were interested in questions about the trail, I mean,
Right.
Bryson and his quasi-mythical friend Katz hiked in the spring of 1996, and this is a period when I was active. I mean, if they needed questions, advice, whatever, of course I would help them out with that. I like Mr. Linklater. I wish him well with the project. I wish him well with the project in that I hope he treats the trail and the trail community better than the book did.
Right.
There's certain aspects of the book that I do not care for. Hikers go hot and cold with Walk in the Woods, and I think a lot of people get huffy and they make more of it than they need to.
Right.
It's a humor/travel book. That's all it was intended to be. Mr. Bryson was a very well-established author. When his publisher approached him and said, hey, he had a contract to deliver a book about the AT, and that's what he did.
Yeah.
He never had any serious intention or expectation of hiking the whole thing.
It's not a Thru-Hiker's memoir.
No.
It's a travel...
Right,
Yeah.
humor/travel book.
Yeah.
The thing about Walk in the Woods, though, is that it sold 3 to 4 million copies, and for better or worse, it has served to introduce a great many people to the trail, including, I've met people that said that this was their reason to get interested in the trail and to eventually hike it. So you kind of have to watch, it's out there. It's the 800-pound gorilla. And that is why I hope the movie succeeds. I mean, it will introduce a great many people to the trail, but I hope it does it in a more responsible way than the book did. So,
Absolutely.
as far as what I want to be in the movie, no.
No. Yeah.
If anyone from the production wants to, ask me questions or fine. I'd be delighted to help them with it in order to make it a better and a more worthy project. But do I have a problem with it being a film? No, one, I don't, and two, even if I did, so what? What am I going to do about it? No, I mean, they're going to spend $100 million on this thing, and my feelings on it, at the end of the day, aren't going to amount to much.
And they're going to fill it on the PCT. I know. I'm just saying. We're like. Well, I hope they do.
You know what? I hope they do some. I hope they do some of the production in the East, and I hope they do it in some trail towns, and I hope they do it in a way that maybe it can. My biggest beef with Mr. Bryson, and this is important, and I actually think that I'm confident that this will be different with the movie project, because Robert Redford, who, unless he has completely cut ties with the project, it was Robert Redford's production company that owned the rights for many years. Robert Redford for 20, 30 odd years has been very, very active in environmental issues and things. If I'm wrong, I apologize, and someone is welcome to correct me, but Bill Bryson made several $1 million off Walk in the Woods.
Right.
He undoubtedly made more money when the work was sold to the film rights and everything. To my knowledge, he hasn't given 20 cents back to the trail. Or if he has chosen to be remarkably anonymous about it.
Yeah.
So my hope is that, if the movie is done, I hope it's a success. I hope it's funny. I hope people like it. I hope it introduces the trail to people. But it would also be nice to see some of the people associated with the production give something back to the trail. And if they end up shooting in a trail community, great. It's going to help
Maybe nice.
outfitters, restaurants, hotels, everything else. So, you joked about it being shot in Canada or California. No, I know that, different states operate differently in how they help and promote film and television production work. Tennessee and North Carolina actually are two of the leaders in the United States as far as that goes, particularly North Carolina. So sure, I hope they elect to do some of the shooting.
Yeah.
That's
what we hope as well. Definitely.
I mean, obviously, if you're shooting like something like Cold Mountain and you need to have 82,000 extras in a battle scene, you're going to film it in Romania or wherever the hell they did it. And I understand how film production works.
Yeah.
But no, I hope they. I look forward to the project.
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. I mean, when I first heard about it, like a lot of people, I was kind of horrified. But it's going to happen. So if it happens, I hope it happens well.
Definitely.
Okay, folks, so that's it for this week. Next week, we'll continue the conversation with Jack. We have a phone call or two that come in and just a bunch of other good stuff. Okay. See you then. Crowdsourcing.
Kill that. Oh.
Yeah, no, don't worry.
Pay no attention to that guy that looked and sounded a lot like Jack Tarlin.
leading up to that. And I mean, I was just wiped out. Like I was really dehydrated, really sick. Probably actually should have stayed in the hospital for a day, kind of thing, but just didn't think about it. It was like I just need some Flagyl to stop pooping constantly and throwing up. And people were like, oh yeah, but like it was really wore on me. Like I probably should have just had a day of fluids. An outpatient thing would have been fine. But so instead, I stayed in this hiker hostel in town, and at the time, it was a big time here because Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire were going for the home run contest. Like they were going for the race to have the most home runs in a year. Again, shit I wouldn't care about, but plop me down in front of a TV after I've been on the trail for 5 months. And it was like, oh, I could watch this, and especially if I'm dehydrated and just drinking Gatorade all the time, and that's it. So in that time, I Barf was still hanging in there with me, and he winds up getting sick as hell. Like he winds up getting some flu or something like that. And while he was there, he realized that that dehydration and NyQuil was a big trigger for him, because he just, like, even to this day, I don't think the dude takes NyQuil, because he just went into this like screaming fit one morning, like like just like I can't remember what, because it was like really early and I was in the same room, and it was like I woke up and it was like there were like 6 single beds in this one room, and it was just kind of like somebody in this room is screaming. And then I was like, wait, where am I? Still dehydrated. It was like, like, oh, Barf, chill. huh? And so, yeah, sorry. It's just a really bad story.
I've heard of a hiker, actually, that has night terrors.
Oh.
And it kind of has, like, the whole camp kind of, like, worried, kind of like, what the hell is going on?
and a lot of times, like, the more stressful... Because I had a kid that I took out in the woods with a group of like 8 one time. He was like, I have night terrors. And it was like, okay. And then one day we went up like 13,000 feet and came back down to like 8,000 and up to 10 and back down to 7. We had a really stressful day, like 20 plus miles, and the biggest day we had on the entire trip. And we had a really great dinner. We're camped out in the middle of this beautiful field where everything around us is 12 or 13,000 feet. It's a beautiful, beautiful field. And like everybody, like we didn't have to, we're just sleeping in a meadow, like just sleeping in our sleeping bags, didn't have to set up tents, anything like that. And I wake up at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to just bloody murder. Just, and we hadn't been around this group the entire time. And so I'm like, what? And me and the other instructor were like, what's going on? And you just heard the other guys go, Greg, shut up. Because they had been around him and he had a few stressful times. I guess he had screamed before with them. Yeah. And it was like, but like the two of us are up like, oh, what the fuck was that? And they're like, Greg, just shut up. Everybody else goes right back to bed, but I don't really fall asleep. I don't think the rest of the night, but he told me, he's like, nah, it's really when I have a bad day. And so I can imagine there's probably a lot of bad days on the AT as far as stressful or just more like stressful, physically stressful. Mm. So yeah, God, I slept around a guy one time. I'm going to rephrase that.
Yeah, it totally went through my head.
So in the 100-mile wilderness.
I slept around.
I slept around a guy. So in the 100-mile wilderness, I was in a shelter, and I probably told this one, but it was the first day I met Flutterby, and the only time I hung out with Flutterby on the trail. And there was a guy in the shelter who snored like one of the Three Stooges. He literally snored. And I started laughing because I was like, "There's no like." I just started laughing. I was like, "No." And people are like, "No, seriously, that's how that dude snores." So that's what I think. I think the number one piece of gear that I always recommend is earplugs.
Yeah.
Do you carry some?
Yeah, I actually kind of like my first night over here. No, sorry, my second night over here in the hike hostel. There was this guy there, and he was like, "So have you got earplugs?" And he was like, I was like, oh no. He was like, you might need these. And like handed me his own earplugs because he's like this crazy snorer.
Yeah.
Like shaking window kind of
Yeah.
loud.
Oh.
So yeah, one of my second night was, even with the earplugs, it was kind of like I could still hear it. And then below me also, there was this guy that sleep talked.
Oh.
But it wasn't just talking. It started off kind of like whispering, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
hearing this, and I was like, okay, yeah, he's definitely sleep talking. Sleep talking. And this is another guy other than the snorer.
Yeah.
And then he starts like talking, and just like talking about this guy called Ray, or so I don't know what it was about. I didn't really work it out. Like, oh, Ray, yeah, what a Ray. So it started off whispering, then he's talking, and then he starts shouting. It's like, yeah, I see you, Ray. And just like, whoa there. And then he finished it with singing. And he just like singing a little tune to himself. So I was like, yeah, got a full scale of like sleep talk.
Now my wife she does that same sleep talking thing, but it does start off like, and all of hers are fights.
Right.
Like every time if she's ever talking in her sleep, it's always a fight, and it's never with me, which I'm always like, were you fighting with me? She's like, no. And most of the time it's somebody that she played soccer with in high school, middle school. And but she'll start off, she's like, you do not talk to me like that. I will that. Fuck that. I will that. And they're all this like short, breathy little. And then and eventually we'll get to kind of like, I told you, no, you stay on that bitch. Don't you back off of that. And then it's like, fuck yeah. She's like yelling at the end of it. And it's like, all right, baby, that's okay. It's got to stop. But like that breathy, whispery, it's so creepy because it's like it to me it sounds like someone's talking to me from the other side.
Yeah,
it's like
white noise.
Yeah, it's like, oh, what is that? Oh god,
half asleep, not really what you want to hear.
Hey,
I did see Bigfoot one time though.
Fuck you. Guess she heard me.
Busted.
I did not start using Twitter until we did this podcast. I had never used it before.
When I started looking into, like, seriously looking into the trail, I was like, that's when I got into kind of like all the Twitter and Instagram and stuff. And then I just literally, probably the first day when I typed in Appalachian Trail, you guys popped up.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really,
And that's
really
how you found us?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just not the right time. But it's funny, you'll notice as people start to kind of, like, you can tell when somebody's ready to go. It's really interesting because they start talking shit about the AT. They're like, oh, this stupid fucking thing, all these fucking people out here. And they start just talking shit about the trail, and you're like, see ya. Like, like I remember one time, like, turning to barf and being like, I don't know, you give it a week, if 2 weeks tops. And it's like, 1-2 weeks tops. And then sure enough, the guy drops off 8 days later. And you're like, yeah, I knew it. I bet when they get to the next town, that's it for them. And that happens quite a bit. So I think some people can't take the monotony of it. And then I think the home life thing too.
Yeah.
But I got lucky. I didn't really have much to worry about going home. I mean, I didn't have something to go home to, but like all I had to go home to was more college, which I wound up taking another 15 years to complete. But yeah, it's just like, you goof off as you go. You have a good time. You see America.
Yep.
I mean, I think it's great when older people do it, but I think it's great for young people. It's like a Rumspringa,
right?
It's like, I think it's a great year between high school and college thing, or maybe after you've been in college a little bit, maybe like when you're 21, so you can drink. But like it's just I met people along the way that had interesting jobs, that lived in interesting places, and it's like, how often living in North Carolina am I going to meet someone from Indiana, Iowa, in the middle of the country that I have nothing in common with? And then you meet them and they're like, oh, I tie flies for a living for LL Bean 6 months out of the year, and then I hike the rest of the time. You're like, you can do that? Wait a minute, you can have these types of jobs? And so yeah, it was really interesting meeting. I do feel like I met more foreign people on the PCT though. Like, I don't know if it's just the California thing.
Tracks more maybe.
Yeah, just more people want to go to California, but I would think the AT would be a pretty, like, here, let's get one for us. So how many people back home actually know what the Appalachian Trail is?
Right, so yeah, kind of like when I mentioned it, people would perhaps, like some people had perhaps heard of the mountain range, but
Right.
not necessarily that there was a trail kind of leading all the way
Right.
north, basically. So yeah, kind of when I mentioned it, people were like, "Oh, all right, okay," or kind of like the obvious, they'd read Bill Bryson's book,
Right.
Because Bill Bryson's quite a big author
Yeah.
over there. But yeah, most of them really didn't know what it was, didn't realise quite how far the trail went. So yeah, kind of like I think my dad knew one other guy that he works with that had done, I think, a section of it.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the only person that I kind of had some connection to through my dad that had actually done a bit of it. Everyone else kind of like, yeah, never really knew it was a trail, never really heard a lot about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they haven't heard of I'm Rick James, bitch. So how are they going to hear about the Appalachian Trail? I mean, now over in the corner there, you have an amazing array of things plugged in.
Probably too much weight.
And well, no, I mean, it's it's definitely different. And we had someone, he's hiking right now, and he had asked a question right before he left. He was wondering if we could talk about electronics, and like, for me, I was completely obsolete. I mean, I had a cassette player
Right.
on the trail, and Puss, she just had like a flip phone. She didn't have a smartphone then, and at the time, the only real smartphone that, like, there were other things out there, but like the iPhone was only on one service provider, which did not give good service.
Yeah.
And so, things have changed. So what do you see people have out there? Like, is pretty much everybody have an iPhone or something like that?
Pretty much everyone has a smartphone, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Quite a lot of iPhones. And then I haven't seen many people with like charge packs. I've seen one or two other guys with like solar panels attached to their backs. Yeah, and I've got kind of like a pretty hefty battery pack which holds about 5 charges and a solar panel, so just so I can definitely have a charge on my phone to keep in contact, kind of, because I'm like that further away from home. I guess it's sort of like, a kind of like a connection that I want to keep, and also my family back home wanted me to keep.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah.
How often do you turn on your phone a day?
I started off kind of like literally just turn it on in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
Just to see if there was, for one, any emergencies back home, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And also in kind of like through the night, I just kind of, for some reason, I felt it more comfortable knowing what time it was throughout the night. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But I've found that kind of if you stick it on like airplane mode, it lasts pretty well, and it's easier just to have it in my pocket in airplane mode, so I can take it out to take a quick shot.
Yeah.
On my phone. So I've got another camera as well to take kind of like better quality pictures of kind of like the landscape, to kind of like keep that. And but I feel the iPhone's just like better for taking quick shots of people, because I want to kind of like take loads of photos of the people I meet along the way, so I don't forget them, because I'm bound to forget their names, because as I've said, I'm terrible with names. So as long as I have pictures of the people I meet, there'll be nice memories.
Now, do you have you like traded phone numbers with people, with other thru-hikers, so you guys can keep up with one another while you're out there? And
yeah, a few people. We've kind of like, because I've been hiking with a group of I don't know, about 12 people, but kind of like on and off kind of since we started. But yeah, I've traded like a few phone numbers already, which is good. Kind of like just to see kind of like if we get kind of like sidetracked kind of like in our own kind of schedule, we can perhaps meet up along the way, or see where we are, see if we bump into each other again. But yeah.
That would be a really cool way to go about it. Then I started thinking, I know I'd give it to somebody that later on I regretted.
Right. Right.
You know, there's gonna be that guy where you're like, oh God, Frenchie, text me again. Sorry, that was a real guy that I think that's who I think of. He was a really nice guy, but I could think like, Frenchie would have my phone number. I'll probably have to edit that out. Yeah.
I think it's definitely very instant now. Kind of like people can send a picture straight to whatever kind of like social networking they're into, and it'll be there that the minute you do it, I guess. Whereas, like you say, back when you did it, there wasn't anything like that. Was
No.
So it's kind of like you kind of wait until you got into town, if that, kind of like, or when you got home, you'd kind of like write something about it online.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, have you seen any spots out there, like the little?
Yeah, I've seen some attached to people's packs.
Yeah.
I looked into it briefly just to kind of like keep mainly my mum kind of like at ease.
And then you're like, oh shit, I got a cell phone.
Yeah.
That's the way I kind of look at it.
It's kind of like if there's anything that bad, then I could just make a call.
Yeah, make a call and they know where you are.
Yeah.
If it's on, and that kind of thing. Yeah, I guess I can see the value in the spot just sending out. It's more for the emergency issue.
Yeah, I've heard like some people on Facebook kind of like their parents won't let them go unless they have a spot. And this is like Americans that kind of like have easy contact with their mobile phones, I guess.
Yeah.
I suppose kind of like there is some lax service in certain parts.
Yeah.
That kind of overrides that. But yeah, I don't know.
Is yours through Virgin or?
No, it's like it's Vodafone back home.
Okay.
And it kind of just attaches to like T-Mobile or AT&T.
Okay, yeah.
And automatically. Yeah, because we have T-Mobile back home, so I don't know whether it's the same company or not.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. Do you guys have the hot chick on the motorcycle riding around in your commercials for T-Mobile?
No.
That's like the only thing she's known for here. It's like, the team. Like I've actually heard I've heard a couple of podcasts reference, like when they're talking about a hot chick, they're like, oh, like the T-Mobile girl. It's like a really bad Anne Hathaway takeoff, you know, but still good at the same time. She has all her hair, not like Les Mis. Oh, at that point in time, that's when Puss would have looked at me and said something like, "Shut up." Let's see. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I guess how do you see thru-hikers now compared to when you hiked? Again, pretty broad, but
Yeah. I think we talked about this earlier, like when we were having dinner, about how I just think this really isn't a difference thing, but I don't want to say narcissistic, but thru-hikers just kind of have to be generally selfish. Like you can be selfless and be friendly, but when it comes time to, like we were talking about, I know what we were talking about because I felt like a jerk because I was kind of like, like you're the first person to come to our house, and my wife's not a thru-hiker, but she has done a lot of hiking, but it's kind of like I trust some hikers and that kind of thing, but it was kind of like my situation was I was like, hey, don't let too many people know that you're going to get a ride. and you said you kind of kept it to yourself, but other people really weren't concerned with it. And then my comment was, well, they will be later.
Yeah, right.
Give it a few months and let the pack thin out a little bit, and there will become a time when it's just like. And then I gave you instantly 3 instances of people who hung on with us for 2 more days because they knew we were getting rides. Yeah. And they went to say, they kind of like, yeah, we can cut it short today, or yeah, we'll go a little bit further today. And just because they knew they wouldn't. And I think it's just because that's one less thing you have to think about.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that ride's taken care of. I know I have to get into blah, 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 and I have to get into Front Royal or whatever the hell it is. It's like, it's just going to be a lot easier if I have a ride waiting for me. So I think there's that. And so I mean, I'm not really answering your question, but I think in general, thru-hikers are inherently selfish. But I mean that in the nicest way.
No, yeah,
I don't mean it like they're jerks.
I understand that, yeah.
Because it is a bit of survival.
Yep.
even though you could, make a phone call or something like that. I think we talked about this earlier. I think that the only other thing that I see, and again, I don't know if this is a difference thing, but is the gear thing, is the magic pill of gear. Yeah. It's like, like Americans want to take the magic pill to lose weight or to do whatever. They don't want to listen to their doctor, and they say, look, if you just eat a little bit better and exercise, it's like, no, I need to have the pill, for whatever it is. And I think that gear is the pill. And there's so much gear porn out there now. We've been asked why we don't talk about gear more. And it's very personal. It's kind of like, well, this is what I have. This is the money I had that I could afford for this gigantic ass trip.
That's it, yeah.
I'm going to make some mistakes along the way, but I think that now the analyzing of gear is one thing that I just...
huge.
It's huge. I mean, yeah.
Everyone has an opinion.
Yeah, we probably would be a lot more popular if we we gave gear reviews, but it's just such a personal thing. And
yeah, I don't know. To be honest, that's what I found so refreshing about the Pox and Puss podcast, was that you didn't go on so much about...
I'll give you your $10 later.
So it was, just more about kind of like what happens on trail, which is, to be honest, to me, is more interesting than someone else's opinion on another piece of gear.
Exactly. Like we were talking earlier, it's like we don't really talk about the trail that much. We talk about the experience and the people that we had while we were out there.
Yeah.
But and also, Puss she's a little more inclined to talk about gear, but for me, I sold it for too many years, and it's a smoke show. But yeah, so I just gear, meh. It's like the trail show. What is it? More
beer,
less gear. Of which we are this month, the month of April, we are finally going to be their beer provider of the month. So. The only thing that I like so far about this show, not having Puss here for, is that every time I've said my wife, she hasn't followed up with the Borat, my wife, which she constantly makes fun of me for.
My wife.
Yeah, my wife. Anyway, let's see. You have anything else? We did a pretty good job. It's an hour and 52 minutes, of which there were a few minutes of peeing and bullshitting. But for an hour long show, that should be fine. That's more than enough that I need to edit.
Right.
But well, cool. Anything else?
I think so.
No. All right. You're gonna use dental floss as sewing.
Yeah.
For the first time ever, huh?
Yeah. I heard about it. Little tip.
Yeah.
I'll give it a go on trail.
In the pair of Solomon. So.
Yep.
Well, cool. Well, follow us on Facebook. Just go to Facebook and look for Pox and Puss. We're probably the only ones there. Find us on Twitter at Pox and Puss. You can follow me at Pox Holiday. You can follow Puss in Boots. You can follow her at AT Puss in Boots. And your Twitter handle?
At Thru-Hiker 2013.
And give us that website for the donations one more time.
virginmoneygiving.com/Thru-Hiker.
And we'll put that on our Twitter account tomorrow or the next couple of days.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, no problem. It's going to bring you millions, trust me. With all 175 followers, don't worry. We literally have dozens of people that listen to us. But yeah. But, well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. It's been great.
And tomorrow I'm going to take you to a place called Bojangles.
Sounds good.
For chicken and biscuits.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, you can find us on Instagram, too, at Pox and Puss. All right. Bye. My name is Pox Holiday, and sitting to my right is...
Puss in Boots.